advocacy for the Colorado Association of School Boards. I was lucky enough to serve 8 years on my school board in Aurora, and then I was board president, and then I also was president of the CASB board before I came back on staff, and I'm starting my 11th year. So let me talk a little bit about CASB as an organization real quick, because if you do get elected, it'll be important. So if we can go ahead and advance that slide. So we represent all 178 school districts across Colorado, and that is all of them, from the very large, the Denver and the Jefferson County and the metro area, down to some of the really, really small ones all over the state. We provide policy, so we provide model policy to boards, and then it's up to the Board of Education to look those policies and adopt it so how it'll fit for their legal for their community. We provide legal information. We can't provide legal advice because we're not the legal counsel for the district or the board. But if there's questions around information items, we can certainly do that. We also do advocacy. So that's what I do for a good chunk of my year, is work down at the state legislature when they're in session, and help hopefully get bills that are beneficial to K-12 education. So we also do a lot of board training and a lot of board facilitation. And as you have a new board coming on in November with elections, as you start to think about how you're going to onboard those folks, we do a lot of that work. So you can jump to the next slide there. So in Colorado, boards of education have a unique legal role. Colorado is one of 6 states that has what's known as local control. And so that means that the locally elected Board of Education has a great deal of authority. And it's actually in the Colorado Constitution. So you'll see on this next slide, Article 9, Section 15 of the Colorado Constitution says that locally elected boards have control of instruction and curriculum within the district. And so what that generally means is the courts have interpreted that the locally elected board has a lot of authority over pretty much anything in the school district. There's certainly some things, obviously, that the board doesn't have control over. You know, federal title would be one example of that. Title IX, Title I, Title II. You know, who you can educate and some of those things. But really, beyond that, the board has a great deal of authority. And so, like I said, we're one of 6 states that has local control. And that's an important issue because it means that the folks over in Grand Junction, for example, may govern differently and have a different set of priorities than the folks in, you know, Steamboat or out in Yuma or in Denver. And by having a locally elected board, you're able to do a lot of those things. So go ahead and go to the next slide there. So boards are elected on behalf of the community, and the way we like to think of it is that the Board of Education is that middle link in that chain, as you see in the picture. So you were, if you're lucky enough to be elected, you're going to govern on behalf of the entire community, and that means the folks that like you, don't like you, maybe don't even know who you are. A lot of times, people will say, you know, I'm running to be a representative of this group or that group. And I tell them that that's great, that's important. However, you need to be aware that once you're elected, you represent the entire school district. The board does its work in public. And so Colorado, and we'll talk about it here in just a minute, but Colorado has some very stringent open meetings requirements. And um, that means that the board really has to do the vast majority of its work in public. But that does not mean it's a public meeting. So it's a public business meeting, but it's not a public meeting. So the board sets the agenda. The board gets to decide the items that are discussed. The board controls public comment. Contrary to popular opinion, there is no legal requirement to have public comment at a board meeting. Now, almost every board I know of has that in their policy, but that's all driven by the board. So that community link piece is really important. And that starts, you know, when you start in August, when you pick up your packet and have to get your signatures. And hopefully you've been building some of those coalitions as you work your way through that process and the election process and getting to know the community. And Madam President, I don't see the audience. So if folks have questions, feel free to interrupt, or we can save them towards the end, however folks want to do it. So,
Sounds good. How about we just wait till the end?
okay,
Okay.
very good. So if we can go ahead and bump to that next slide then. So as I said, the Colorado Constitution actually allows the board to transact business within the school district. That doesn't mean, however, that the board has to be involved in every aspect of the operation. Most districts, in fact, all of them in Colorado that I'm aware of, hire a superintendent. And so the board has a role in kind of setting the goals and the scope and the vision and the mission of the work. And then it's up to the superintendent for him or her to carry that work out, right? The board has to educate every child that shows up at the schoolhouse door. This is a long-standing legal precedent where, you know, if a child shows up and they live in that community, you have a duty to educate them. And so that's where we get this idea of a free, thorough, and uniform education. And so we don't have a lot of those same issues, you know, around, you know, who gets the ability to attend a school and who doesn't. And then, like I said, most boards will delegate the authority for kind of day-to-day operations to a superintendent. And that board superintendent relationship is really critical. The board has to be really clear in their goals and their actions and what they want the organization to do. And then the superintendent will then interpret that through policy, board action, and how they're going to bring that forward. And so if you have not yet, and if you're seriously considering being a school board member, I would definitely try to get some time with the superintendent to sit down one-on-one and just kind of talk about their role. You've got a really good superintendent there, and so I encourage you to do that. If we could go one more slide. So this is what I was talking about earlier. As an individual, you are elected to the board. However, as one individual, you have really zero power. The only power the board has is corporately as at least a majority. And so, again, you will sometimes hear people, you know, that will get elected to fix one particular issue, whatever that might be, and they get on the board and they're like, I want to do this, and how do I do this? And my response is, you need to build a coalition with the rest of your board members. You need to work through policy and help them do that. And they're like, that's not how I want to do it. I'm like, well, that's really, you know, not how the system works. You have to build that coalition. The board speaks as one voice, and that voice is through policy adopted by a majority of the board. And so that's really that role. So you've got this local constituency piece. You certainly want to hear from folks and what they want to see, but the only way you can get anything done is if you build that coalition and go and work with your fellow board members corporately as a whole. So we can go ahead and go one more slide here. So why should the board lead by policy? Well, for one thing, it's the law, so it's always a good thing to follow the law and not be in violation of that. But as you see, there's the Colorado Revised Statute. Boards must adopt policy and prescribe regulations necessary for the efficient administration of the district. And not to get too much into the weeds here, but oftentimes you'll hear us talk about a board policy and an administrative policy or rule or regulation, and they are somewhat similar and also somewhat differently. So the board adopts a policy, but then they give that, so to speak, to the superintendent to carry that out, to create the rules and the regulations and how that particular policy is going to look within the school district. So, for example, the legislature in Colorado concluded a little over a month ago, and there were a number of bills that were passed. And as you might imagine, a number of those bills had an impact on K-12 education. And as a result, CASB has sent out model policies saying, hey, Bill XYZ has passed, and the board now needs to look at a policy. And so the board will get a number of policies. Those go into the administration, but it's up to the superintendent to make sure those policies are being followed and that the rules and regulations and the administration has done its job to get that out to the employees and students and community members. So again, a lot of times folks get confused by this. They're right, you know, they say, well, the board needs to do this, and I will say, absolutely. What's your policy on that? You know, purchasing is a great example. You know, there will be examples of things the district has to purchase, right? Uh, Diesel fuel for buses or or food for school lunches. And so different boards will have different thresholds on how large or how small a purchase has to be before the board needs to approve it. The board basically adopts the budget, and then within the constraints of that budget, it's up to the superintendent to carry out all those other things, and then bring evidence back to the board, of course, that they're doing those in an efficient and ethical and a legal manner. Go ahead and go one more slide if you could, please. So as I mentioned, these are meetings in public. They're not a public meeting. The board's agenda is a critical thing. I am a big believer in agendas because agendas tell your community where the board's values are. Because if you spend your time on something, that means that's important to you, hopefully. And so board agendas really should be mostly focused on students, right? And what we're doing to improve the lives and the outcomes and those people that we're doing that on behalf of. Um, a lot of times, if board agendas are overly full of what I would call adult type things, a lot of um, unfortunately, there's been a lot of politics in school boards the last really 10 years or so. If I see a lot of those things on the agenda, my question is always, how are those agenda items then in turn helping to advance what we're trying to do on behalf of those students? And then the public comment piece. It's really up to the board on when they will accept public comment, who can speak. A lot of times, certainly during the COVID times, uh, you had a lot of people because all the boards were Zooming their meetings or streaming them online. It was not uncommon to have people from outside the school district come and speak about a particular topic. So some boards adopted policies that said you had to be a member of the community to get the ability to speak live, right? You could still submit written comments. But the board policy on public comment is, who can speak, how long they can speak, what items they can speak to. And the other thing I'll just say quickly about public comment at board meetings is that generally that's not the best way to interact with your community because the board doesn't typically carry on a conversation. So someone comes and says, I'm really upset about a particular item. And the board doesn't know what they're going to speak about. They don't have the history, they don't have the background. So the board says, thank you very much for coming tonight. We don't carry on a conversation. And so it's not a good back and forth, but it's an important thing. And obviously, like I said, I'm not aware of any board that doesn't allow some form of public comment during the board meetings. Okay, if we could go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, Colorado has really stringent laws regarding what the public has right to see the board do their business. And basically, it says this: if there are two or more board members together and they're discussing or conducting business on behalf of the school district, that is an open meeting, and that the public has the right to be able to observe that meeting. And so, for instance, if the board had a particular vote coming up, right, and the members of the board were carrying on an email conversation uh, and saying, well, here's what I think about it, here's what I think, here's how I might vote, that would be a violation of the Colorado Open Meetings Law. That discussion, that debate needs to happen in public. And also, as a result, those emails then become public record. Someone could put in a CORA request, a Colorado Open Records Act, to have those things made available. There are 9 instances where the board can meet by itself with legal counsel in what's known as an executive session, but only 9 things. And so there are a lot of things where boards would prefer sometimes to have some space to talk about this without the public, being right there. But the law says you can't do that. So I would encourage you as you continue to think about if this is for you and if you want to serve on your board to be familiar with some of these things and get used to this idea that all of the board's work really is in public. And we give you some of the CRSs there, and I'll make sure now that you all have the slide deck, I'm sure they can share this with you as well. So go ahead. So those executive meetings, executive sessions, like I said, there's 9 reasons. There is a great deal of confidentiality required by board members because oftentimes those items that are conducted in executive session relate to students. They may relate to employer-employee relationships or a contract that the board has. So those are confidential. So you can't set in an executive session and then come out and say, hey, guess what the board just talked about, right? That would violate what's known as attorney-client privilege, and then that would make that whole thing open. So, right? There's also very specific procedures for an executive session. It has to be noticed 24 hours ahead of time. There's very specific language. You do have to make a recording of that as a board. So all of those things, again, are something that I would just encourage you to become familiar with if you do get elected to the board. Um, your board lawyer is a really good resource, and I always encourage people, if you ever have a question, to just slow down, take a minute, and say, are we doing this right? Are we going to get ourselves in trouble? Especially around, like I said, the open meetings and the executive session stuff. So I'm not a lawyer. I know just enough to get myself in trouble, probably. So I always encourage you to speak to your local district council and make sure that the board and the board members are doing those things correctly and effectively. So go ahead and go to the next one, please. These are two questions that I always encourage people to think about, right? And a lot of times when I do board training and board facilitation, these are the two questions I'll start out with. And the first one is really, why did you want to serve on the Board of Education? And the reason I ask this question is if I hear somebody say, well, I want to get this person fired, or I want to change this particular thing, or I just don't think the system's working and I want to, just tear it up and start over. That obviously gives an indication of where that person is. But if I hear that, I want to serve my community, I want to make sure our young people are getting the education that they deserve. I see the value and the importance of education in the school district. That also gives you some indication. And then that idea around the role of the Board of Education. Um, as I said, a lot of times people think they have an idea of what the board does, and then they get on the board and they realize it's not that at all. And so those are a couple things I would just encourage you to think about, right? Why do you want the job? Why do you want to do this? And then what is that role of the board and how effective or do you think you can be with that? So go ahead to the next question. So at this point, if there are questions, and I know I moved through a bunch of material pretty quickly, and sometimes I talk pretty fast, but if there are specific questions, I am happy to take those. And then I just want to pop back with a couple of things on the last slide for you. But questions or anything I can help with any of those slides that we raised.
Thank you, Matt. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and just come up to one of these two microphones, and you're welcome to ask Matt any questions on the slides that he had. So you'll have to turn the microphone on, I believe. So just click the little button up. Yep. And then maybe just introduce yourself. Because I don't think he can see you.
No, I just see
Okay.
you two.
All right. Thank you, Matt.
Oh, now
Thank
I
you.
do.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, great. Thank you. My name is Teresa. Can you please repeat the Colorado revised statutes that compromise the local school district and the state school district responsibilities? I got CRS 22 something.
Jacob,
Yeah,
could you go back to that slide?
Yeah, I'll make sure that you all have the slides, but basically the authority from the board starts in the Constitution, Article
Yeah.
9, Section 15 of the Colorado Constitution. And then there are specific CRSs, all what's known as Title 22, which is where all of the education stuff lives, related to board operations and board authority.
Okay, so you said the Constitution, Article 15, and then the CRS 22 starting at 32.
It's Article 9, Section 15.
Sorry, that's it. Thank
Yep,
you.
Article
Thank
9,
you.
Section 15.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Great. Any other questions? Okay. Matt, I don't think we have any other questions. Were there a couple other things you said you wanted to kind of tie this up with?
Yeah, if we could just pop up those last two slides. I think they're at the very end. There you go. So I wanted to throw up, there's my contact information, my email. If you do have additional questions, I'm happy to chat with that. The other thing I would say that that I didn't is that you've got some great resources on currently serving board members. I would encourage you to sit down and have a cup of coffee with these folks and talk to them what board service looks like. I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to attend some board meetings and see what that looks like. And then finally, that superintendent piece, if you can get some time on the calendar with the superintendent, I think that's super important. And then what I would tell you is that if you do get elected in November, the CASB annual convention, which this year is I think it's the 11th to the 13th of December. This is our big annual convention. We have, close to 1,200 people come from all across the state. This is a school board election year, so there'll be a lot of new members. It's a great opportunity to have some development, some time with your new board members, learn a lot more about what the job is and what the role is. And so I would encourage you, if you are thinking to look at that second week in December, and make sure you're available to come and join us at the annual convention. And then, like I said, there's my cell phone and my email address if you ever have questions or anything that pops up, maybe later. I'm happy to address those. But you've got some great resources on the staff there in the school district and some great folks. So uh, they can answer the vast majority of your questions. And in fact, as you roll into the election process, the designated election official within the district is somebody that you're going to get to know very well because they'll have the petitions, they'll have the packets, all that information. They'll be the ones verifying the signatures to make you eligible to run in some of those other things. So, Madam President, that's all I had at this point.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for your time this evening. We really appreciate it.
Of course, happy to do it. Happy to be here.
All right. Well, take care.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, for the rest of the time, Director Chavez and I are here if you guys have any other questions. And actually, he mentioned the elected official, which will be Amy. And actually, we will be voting on that tomorrow evening. So Amy Navarette, who you usually see up here on the side, which is she's board secretary and superintendent secretary. She will be our elected official. So when the time comes, you'll go to the board office and pick up the petition in early August. So do you guys have any questions kind of on the technicalities, like the how-tos? Those were always kind of questions I had when I first ran. Yeah. Yeah, year-round employee, 7:30 to 4:30 at the district office. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. And so then her information will be available as well on the district website as the designated elected official. You have any questions for Director Chavez and I? The process, what you have to do, you have to get 50 signatures, so obviously I would recommend getting more because they have to verify those, so sometimes people either fill them out wrong or they're not registered, or they may not live where they say they live, just different things, so. Oh, yeah, Jacob, could you get on the district website and find the map of the districts of the board members? So if you go under, I think, the board. It's hard to see, but if you can read the descriptions, now you do not have to get petition signatures based off of your district. You can get signatures from anybody, so. They just have to be, yeah, but where you live, yeah. Yeah. If you're unclear, you can call Amy and give her your address, and she can double check the district of where you live, and she'll tell you what district you're in, so. Yeah, because there's some little carve-outs in certain areas, so. Yes, question in the back. Yes. Right, so you can register with the Secretary of State at any time. And then, so you have to get on Tracer, which, so you can either register or you can get a registered agent who registers you. And so then, once you're on the Secretary of State's website, then your name is on there. And then once you officially announce and start getting contributions, and then spending money on your campaign, that's really kind of when you're official. And then you can, obviously be going out and, then you're official and you can announce. Then, so really, you could be campaigning for years before, so there's really no time frame. The petition is what's the most important part. You have to pick that up early August, and you have to get that turned in by the end of August. There's a time frame you have to do that. And if you don't get that in and also those signatures verified, your name will not get on the ballot. So the petition is what you have the time frame for. That's probably the most important. But as far as your name being on the Secretary of State and then fundraising, there's no time frame as far as that goes. Director Chavez, do you want to?
And
Yeah.
once you get on Tracer, you could always call the Secretary of the State. They're really good people, and they're willing to answer any questions. Because there's a reporting that you have to do when you start getting your money, any type of donations that you have to report. And if you don't report by a certain time, and when you start on Tracer, they will give you the times that they're due. There is consequences if you don't do the report on time. But they're really friendly people, and you could just ask them, what do I do? How do I write my name in there to make sure that it's followed in there and it's paid by, if you're doing something, it's paid by Jose Luis Chavez's committee type thing, and they will help you with that.
Yeah, this map, I've tried to zoom in as close as you possibly can to try to see where. And then there's also the, kind of the descriptions as well that will tell you where the boundaries are. So anybody interested can get on Tracer now and then just make sure you pick up those petitions in August. Any other questions? Yeah, and like Matt Cook said, make sure you have those dates in December blocked out, so the district does pay for school board members to go to the CASB convention. It's really helpful for new school board members because there's a lot of training for new school board members, and there's a lot of good information there's a lot to learn initially, and so it's really beneficial to be able to have that time blocked out. So it does come up really quickly after you're sworn in, so it's good to have those dates ahead of time to having your head, so, yeah. It is, yeah. So you can be paid in the state of Colorado. The boards can vote on that, but we are not paid in Mesa County. So it is 100% volunteer. And I don't know, hours per,
Well, it's at least 3 hours every other week.
You know, if,
Like, what are the additional committees, like, what are those additional,
commitments.
yeah, it's like, on a regular basis.
what I tell people is basically when you're on the board, because you have, you will find out what's on the agenda a couple days before, so you have time, and there's a lot of reading that you have to do, so that takes up a lot of the time. So I think basically you average about 15 to 20 hours per week, doing school board stuff, where you'll be going to meetings, committee meetings. You'll be going through schools, checking out how the schools are doing and all that type of stuff. There's things that happen outside where people will invite the school board to come in, and we'll have to speak to people about what we do. You'll talk to students, those type of things. Then there's like graduation week. It's over 20 hours, because you just spend the whole day just basically going to one graduation to the next graduation. Also depends on what issues are going on. If when we're discussing schools, and if there's going to be a school closure, all those, that's going to extend the time, because there's just so much that you have to be doing.
And the committees, are they kind of delegated as like, this person is an expert in nutrition services, this one is, I don't know, bus services, this one is elementary, this one is high school. So those committees that you're talking about, did they get kind of slotted so that one person kind of gets to dig into each area? Or
We try to rotate a little bit so that every board member can get experience on all the committees, but part of it is also a timing thing as well. So if one board member, because the committees also meet at different times, so if one committee time doesn't work for a board member, we'll see if there's a time that works better for another board member. So it's kind of a few different things. So, yeah.
I'm just wondering if they were kind of like how, just for instance, the city has
Airport, yeah, Parks and Rec, and yeah,
Parks District
yeah, yeah, yeah,
each week, of course,
yeah.
that they each meet, so.
If there's one you're interested in, or yeah, like, yeah. Yeah. Well, initially, like Director Lima was really, she's really good with finance. So that was one she initially got on. And she was also on the D51 Foundation Board for like the first couple of years. And then she just got off of that one. And then I just got on the D51 Foundation Board. So I'll be on that one. And then, somebody else will cycle on to that one. And then I was on comp oversight for a couple of years. And now Director Chavez and Director Evanson are on that one. And so then we kind of just cycle around. So actually every year, well, 2 years when we do our organizational meeting, we usually re-look at the committees. So we try to keep them every 2 years because you learn a lot kind of that initial year. But sometimes if if your schedules change and, then we'll be flexible and we kind of move around. So,
And
yeah.
was it CDE that's,
Yep, that's up this fall.
has anybody turned out?
No, not this time.
Okay, so anybody that's here running is gonna run against someone that's still in incumbent.
Correct. Yes,
Pardon? If the incumbent is next. Yeah, yes.
yeah.
And it's 2-year terms or 4-year terms?
It's 2 4-year terms. And then if you take a break of 4 years, you can run again.
So you can do 12 years?
You could do 16 years
Okay, so you can do.
and then take another 4 years and
How long is it right now?
I don't know who wants to do that. I think it's the same with like, as long as you take a 4-year break between any 2 consecutive, terms.
Yeah.
Great questions.
I also think when you're running for the board, the other thing you have to take a look at is that if you get elected and you're on the board, you're here to help and serve the whole district, not just one component of the district. And I think a lot of people sometimes forget that. So it's all staff, from the bottom to the top, you have to support, and your part of your job is to make sure that this district remains stable. And sometimes that becomes difficult at times when trying to discuss things and trying to help. And the other part is, if you're elected on the board, you have to be able to build bridges with all the people that are on the board, because you don't know them. They don't really know you, so you have to be able to sit there and be able to have conversations with them and say what you feel, and they'll tell you what you feel and what they feel, and then you work together and you go, there's got to be compromise at times. It just can't be, like what Matt said, it just can't be one way. It has to be a compromise so that everybody, and no matter what position you are on the board, whether you're the president or you're a secretary or wherever you're at, you only get one vote. And so all votes weigh the same, and that's really important.
Yeah, we have a much better onboarding process this time, so that few weeks between when you're elected and then before you're sworn in, we have an onboarding, like binder now to help the new board members kind of have a better footing, like when they, come on now. So we sat down with Director Evanson and Director Chavez so that they just had a better idea of like, here's what our agenda is, and here's how you make a motion, and so that when they get into their first meeting, you're not, kind of a deer in the headlights sort of thing. And so that wasn't around when we first got on the board, and even though I had been on some previous boards, they were much smaller and usually a little bit more relaxed. This is just different. We are the largest employer in the district, and we have a $250 million annual budget. So, it's just a different caliber of board. And so, and it also, I think, to Director Chavez's point, I think it helps build those bridges right from the get-go. You get to know each other, right away, and, whether you have different ideas, like Matt said and like Director Chavez said, we govern as a body. Our votes and decisions only come together as a decision as a body, not as an individual. We each have our own thoughts and opinions, and we hash those out, and we can talk to each other about those things, but, the decision is made, as a whole or as a majority. So I think that onboarding process has really helped, I think, bring the temperature down, since at least I started in '21. So I think it's helped a lot.
And I think the other part is, if you're elected, then in November, when you get sworn in to be on the board, CASB's the following month in December. And that really helps, because then you get to meet everybody on the board, and you get to talk to each other. You get to have dinner together. Yeah, Tammy's there, so you get to talk with Tammy. Brian's there. So we all get to meet and we get to have a conversation. And we get to sort of feel each other out a little bit. And that's really nice. I think that's a nice way, and I don't think if we had CASB that would happen, and it would take longer to build those bridges and build a partnership with the rest of the board members. So I would advise you that if you do get elected, to go to CASB.
Plus, you get to make some really great connections with board members across the state. And so, we don't need to recreate the wheel if there's other boards across the state that have, things that they're doing. So it's just a great networking with other boards as well. Great. Any other questions?
And if you're concerned about the budget, please meet with Mel. Senora Trujillo, she's really good, and she'll sit with you and she'll explain the whole budget to you. That's a good thing to know before you sit on the board, because everything that comes in, and she's really good, because I know when I started and even now, I'll ask her a question going, what does that mean? Because they abbreviate everything, which I had no idea what those abbreviations were. So I was always asking her, what does this mean? So she would have to explain it to me. But she's very patient. And everybody in the district, if you ask, they will help you and explain things to you.
And just like Matt said, if you guys want to reach out to us individually and have coffee or iced tea or something with one of us, we're more than happy. I know I met with some individual board members when I ran, and I also got to meet with Dr. Hill when I was interested in running, just to kind of chat and just kind of get a feel for things when I was interested in running as well. So if you guys are open to that, just reach out to us. Happy to chat. Any other questions? All right. Thanks, guys, for coming, taking time out of your evening. So safe travels home.